Okay, so after c3, we plan to play knight c6. D takes c5 is not usually recommended because black can easily regain the pawn. Not by e5, because after e5, e5, b4, a3, and then possible b5 followed by knight takes e5. So what we do, we play a5 first. Yan muna. And then after, let's say for example, bishop f4, we try to go knight f6. And let's say for example he goes h3, we go knight e4, threatening knight takes c5, regaining the pawn and having two pawns in the center. For example, knight bishop e2, e3, bishop e2, knight takes c5. After eventual play, maybe in the middle game, black will be able to play e5, gaining control of the center. Kapag dalawa yung pawn mo sa center, mas malaking potential na magkaroon ka ng space advantage dahil sa mas malaking control mo sa center, no? After some preparation, black can play e5 na and then control the game eventually, no? This is an option. So after knight c6, white can play we can say maybe bishop f4, and then after knight f6, e3, now we go queen b6, and after the best move, which is queen b3, I already discussed what will happen if white will opt for queen c1. Expose kasing queen na yan sa diagonal na yan. We will play bishop f5, rook c8, and eventually pawn takes d4. Not e6 kasi mawawala ng suporta yung bishop sa rook, no? An eventual possibility is like this. And we cannot play knight takes d4 because the rook on c8 is hanging. Queen takes c8. So the best for black is to play rook c8 at once and then threaten to capture on d4 since may suporta pa siya ng bishop f5. That's why queen c1 at once is not recommended. But instead, queen b3. Okay? We will wait for black to play c4 before we play queen c2. Now, I will discuss later on what will happen if white captures on b6, and after an eventual a takes b6 or pawn takes queen, I will show how black will attack white's position, which gives black the advantage. Okay, so instead of capturing, queen c1, queen c2 is advised, bishop f5 and queen c1, not queen takes f5, because there is queen takes b2, we will lose the rook. So instead we will play queen c1. Now we can now see that rook c8 is does not have the same force because the pawn is already on c4. Wala na tayong kain sa d4. So hindi na effective yung ganyan technique. So instead of rook c8, we will play e6, rekta na. And then after further development, bishop e2, bishop e7, castle, castle, knight bd2, rook f to c8, knight e5. We need to capture, no? Knight e5 is should be played dahil if black will able to play knight d7 and eventually get some play on the queen side later on, medyo malakas yung threat kasi ng knight a4, no? It will disrupt white's position, white's queen side. So this move has to be played. And after eventual capture, there's a game played by top Grandmaster. Black is Kramnik, and white is Ethin Bakrot from top Grandmaster from I think France. Okay, I'll just show the game without comment so you can see how typical the game would continue from this position. Here, Bakrot plays a4, trying to forestall b5 from Kramnik. Kramnik tries to exchange the London Bishop. Kaya niya ginawa yan para magkaroon siya ng access sa b-file na later on lalagyan niya ng rook pagkatapos ng a6, a6 b5, and after some exchange b4, no, para magkaroon ng force yung atake niya sa queen side. Kaya niya ginawa yon. So after bishop d6, white captures, no. Actually, bishop g4, g3 is also playable, but not bishop takes e5 agad. Actually, black threatens bishop takes e5. Let's say, for example, white will just play h3. Okay, this is considered advantage for black. The knight will eventually go on c5 and eyeing the b3, d3, e4 square, which makes this knight very strong. So that's not usually recommended. So instead of waiting, he simply captures it. Queen takes bishop, rook e1, and Kramnik starts his attack on the queen side. b8, bishop f3, Bakrot tries to counter in the center by playing e4. Kramnik forestalled it, queen c6, g3, and then rook c7. Okay, white continues bishop g2. He plays bishop f1. Para nga naman pag e4, meron pa ring scope yung bishop dito sa b-file. Mas malakas yung atake niya sa b-file. Kasi kung hinayaan niya ng bishop and white was able to play e4, later on, walang masyadong effect yung push niya sa b-file kasi na barikadahan niya yung bishop sa diagonal. So, pinasok muna ni Kramnik. And then after knight f3, knight d7, pinevent niya yung attempt ng white na mag-play ng knight e5. He switched back to knight d2, inviting a repetition kasi pag knight f6, ganun uli ang gagawin niya. Therefore, a draw might happen. Kramnik places his pawns on the light squares, f5, para hindi na mangyaring e4. So, it makes his b-file attack more stronger. Okay? And take note, kahit bad bishop yung bishop niya, nakalabas siya sa pawn chain, which is a good thing to do para magkaroon ng activity yung minor piece na yan. So, after bishop f1, Bakrot realizes the pressure. So, he tries to eliminate it. Which, black gladly obliged. Kasi nga naman, bad bishop yung pinalik yung good bishop ni Bakrot. So, after b5, Kramnik starts his attack on the b file, which is common in this particular London setup. Eventually, after some moves, okay, inalaw ni Kramnik yan knight e5, a4, f3, a6, trying to protect the 6th rank, g4, a very strong attempt by Bakrot, no? He tries to counter on the king side, trying to create some open lines, which is very good. Either than just standing still and waiting for Kramnik to do the kill. So he tries to counter. So tatandaan nyo yun, guys, kapag inatake kayo sa isang side at sarado yung center, the next best thing to do is to counter on the other wing or on the other side. That's what Bakrot did. Knight e4, h4, and then Kramnik tries to force things on the queen side by playing queen d3, threatening possible tripling on the file, or maybe playing this and then a3. But Backcross knows what will happen, so he exchanged. So the eventual exchange was done, and then as you can see, after the check here by white, so in this position, Backrot tries to play rook a8 check. So Backrot played rook a8 check, and after king h7, h5, with a very powerful threat of knight g6 followed by rook h8 mate. What Kramnik did, he of course have seen this position, and he played a perpetual on the king. After the following moves, king g2, rook b2 check, king f1, rook b1 check, king g2, and then after rook b2 check, the draw was agreed. But let's try to analyze what will happen if black or white tries to win. Okay, so if white tries to play king h3 trying to win, Kramnik will just play knight g5 check and back to e4, because after king h4, knight e4, black has a mate threat of rook h2. So he doesn't have time to play knight g6, kasi pag nag-knight g6 siya, mate. Kaya yan mangyayari. So instead, white has to go back, king h3 and check again. After king g3, check again, no? King f4 is not possible, because after rook f2 check, knight f3, knight g5, it is black who is winning. Okay, so let's try to go back. And if black tries to play king f3, he would be again mated by black by playing rook f2. So this variation was seen by both players, particularly Kramnik, who tries to enter this endgame, and he knows that it's a draw. Okay, I know later on, earlier in the game, Kramnik has some chances, better chances, but Backrot was just very strong to create counter chances sa king side, kaya sila nag-draw. But if it's against a lesser player, maybe below master strength, kahit siguro NM strength, a win is very more likely to happen with the black pieces than white's pieces. So that's how deadly or how effective black's setup against the London is. And I hope you share the same sentiment as Kramnik and I do when it comes to meeting the London type of position if you're playing d5 on the first move. Now let's try to check and see what will happen if white plays queen takes b6, as I mentioned earlier. I'm sorry about the mix-up of moves. In b3, who's to move here? 1 2 3 4 5 1 2 3 4 5 6. It's black to move. After c4, instead of queen c2, queen takes b6, a takes b6. Let's try to analyze or study the possibility after this move. Okay, the problem with this position is black's queen side push, especially the break here, b5, b4, is very fast. If white just allows it to happen, b5, castle, and then b4, he will find himself in a tight spot, especially after an eventual pressure here. Let's say for example this, and then this. You see now that the two pawns are weak. The C pawn is weak, the A2 is weak, A2 pawn is weak. So after an eventual, let's say for example, rook a3, white has to defend, and then most probably bishop f5 followed by b5, b4, e6, before b4 of course. So possible is e6 and then b5, and then when b4 comes, black will be able to produce a pass pawn on the c file, which is the c4 pawn, plus pressure the a2 pawn, which is very negative for white. So we don't want that to happen. So instead of allowing that, after b5, white needs to play a3 first. Actually, b6, okay. Who's to move here? Queen c4, queen a takes b6. Okay, a3, b5, a3. Actually, b4 is still possible, but after pawn takes, knight take rook c1, everything is defended, and black's knight has to go back. So, sorry. So after, instead of playing b4 at once, black will proceed with b5, and then after rook c1, e6, he has to be careful because black now plans to transfer his knight here on a4 and win the b pawn. That's a very clear plan. So white has to play knight e5 to prevent knight e7, and after an eventual capture, knight b6, white is simply a move late, okay, in this position. Kasi kailangan niyang ma-play itong bishop d1 in order for him to capture the knight on a4. So I guess instead of playing knight e5 at once, bishop e2, knight e7, knight d7, h3, bishop e7, or maybe knight b6. No, it would yeah, knight b6, go to a4, bishop d1, and then after bishop e7, castle, white needs to wait for black to play knight a4, or he can force it by playing bishop c7. After knight a4, takes, later on mapupwersa rin yung white na umatras pabalik, you know? So he can do it voluntarily actually. Bishop g3 or bishop h2, and then what black will do now is to transfer his rook here on the b file to target this pawn on b2 and eventually win it. Kung sakaling masuportahan ng white yan, let's say for example he plays moves like this, maybe even like this, black still has a possibility of pressuring the position. Bishop b1 is possible, or if he's able to make a certain concession, let's say for example like for example na nagamit niya yung file na to defend the position, like for example like that, black can still win by simply playing this and then this, which gives him a pass pawn on the c file and eventual supremacy over the back rank, no? Actually, black can secure himself also like that. Okay, and still white is still losing eventually in the long run. So that's the main problem of this variation as white. So now let's try to see. Actually, I played that several times to some devoted London players at some tournaments, and most frequently with my chess friends on the chess clubs and on the chess parks, chess in the parks, let's say. They would eventually play a different kind of moves or sequence of moves. So for example, after h3, c5, sometimes I see e3 they don't bring the bishop out, and they will try to play in such a way, in a reserved way, we can say that, and then place the bishop on the long diagonal b3. Well, this is possible, but I'm not really a fan of it kasi it gives black the option to play e5, and if black chooses to, you know, to maybe I'll just play rook c8, or maybe queen c7, and then once well, a6 is useful too. Once white tries to play this line, or I guess better for black, instead of playing that with queen c7, which is quite committal, a6 is also possible after knight bd2. Maybe bishop h7, and then if black plays this and then followed by knight d4, black will simply castle, and he has the makings of a very strong center. Let's say, for example, black will play later on, oh, we can let him play that. Well, Uno is changing with the help white, so let's just play constructive move, rook c8. Let him play that. Let's see if he plays that, we just capture it with the knight, or with the king, with the knight of course. And then in this position, it's black's advantage kasi dalawa yung pawn niya sa sentro, no? After rook e8, queen e7, eventually if black was able to set up both of his pawns on e5, d5, that will give him the advantage. The pressure on the c file would eventually tell for white, or black can even do queen e7 and exchange dark square bishops. So white usually prevents that from happening. And after some time, the bishop d6, eventually black will be able to play e5 d5, so it's advantage. Sometimes white allows bishop g4, and that's also quite good for us as black. After bishop b2, let's say bishop d6, he captures, bishop d, the knight d4. We do not play bishop takes e2 because that will help white. We play bishop g6, and after bishop d3, we castle. So this position is favorable for black. Rook c8, and after eventually rook f d8, a6, and e5, black will have an advantage. Of course, before you play e5, we don't want knight f5, so we capture on d3 first and then play f5. Or we can delay e5 eventually. We must try to make things clear for white here. Actually, here's a sample plan here. Queen e2, bishop d6. Black will use this diagonal, no? Kasi yung bishop ng white sa b2 does not help in preventing that particular part. Let's say, for example, white just moves here. We have a possibility of playing this way. So yeah, a6, and then let's say, for example, white captures that. White plays c4, or maybe even rook d1. Yeah. Well, I guess in this position, we can see how the space advantage tells against white, no? Wala namang pwestuhan yung piyesa niya, no? Black can just simply play knight e4, maybe even f5 in some positions, or maybe knight e5, queen d6, threatening mate here, but there's a guard on f1, so it's not really flexible, but it's a possibility black can look at. So everything is looking good for black. Well, if that sounds complicated to you and you just like want to have a solid game, I recommend you to adopt the Slav formation for black, which goes after bishop d4. And if white tries to play knight e5, we just play bishop h5 and bishop f4, play c6, and after c3, knight f6, and then queen b3, we just play queen d6. So after an eventual knight d2, knight d7, um, e3, and e6, both sides will develop, and eventually in this particular position, well, I can say white is slightly better, but black is solid enough to hold his own ground. That's how dry London system for white is. No, it doesn't really promise anything for white unless black really plays badly. Unless na mali-mali ang tinitira ng black sa opening, walang advantage na mapapala yung mga white players sa London system. And well, that's the main reason why one player has to study some opening lines, main lines, popular lines played by masters, because that's the way chess is. No, if you play just ordinary moves, your level will not increase. If you want to play on a higher level, you must study the opening theory or the opening systems, like how master plays. Okay, so anyway, I hope you like my video, two-part series of the London system. I hope you learn from it, you learn a lot from it, and I hope it can help you in your games. So again, this is Sir Glenn Garcia signing off for the moment, and wait for my other videos. So please click on like, subscribe, and share to your chess friends. Have a nice day. Bye bye.